Hey everyone. So this is my finger technique drum video thing. Basically, this summer I took a couple months to work on my left hand, which at the time I had fairly even speed on both hands, but my left hand I had kind of developed this like wristy sort of closer to German grip technique versus my right hand where I'd kind of developed French finger technique on my own. So I just kind of felt like I was being limited by my left hand technique, and I wanted to also just kind of make things feel more even. So this video is just, like I said, a collection of my practice clips to show you guys what I did and some of the ideas that you can use in your own practice. So first of all, I want everyone to keep in mind that I've been playing for over 10 years, and I don't really recommend this type of practice to really anybody. It's not very exciting or interesting, and I got really far on my own by just playing the drums. So that's always what I recommend to people. This is more, like I said, I had a specific technique issue that I wanted to work on, so I really dedicated some time to this. But if you're someone who's newer to the drums and you're just trying to learn finger technique for the first time, or you're just trying to bring your speed up, I don't recommend doing this. This is something I would say, unless you're playing like, up to 200 beats per minute, 16th notes already, don't even waste your time doing stuff like this. Just play the drums and have fun, because this is not, I don't like doing this really. I just do it when I need to do it. So anyway, this is one of my first practice sessions. It's not the very first, but maybe like the third or fourth practice session. So here you can see I really am focusing on the finger movement. And what I found the easiest way to isolate that was to start with one or two fingers on the stick. So just my thumb, and then either my pointer finger or my pointer and my middle finger. And the reason I do that is because I found that the more fingers I put on the stick, the more likely I was to default to my old wrist technique. So I just started with one or two, because then it forced me to swing the stick kind of basically straight up and down using only those fingers. And my whole practice routine, as you'll see, there's not a lot of structure to it. Basically, I just put on a timer for 15 minutes and I just hit my pad a lot. And that's kind of it. So there's really not a lot of like structure or any like specific exercises. It's more about just getting reps, and just, muscle memory is just built by repetition. So there are a few concepts here I'm going to talk about. Like I said, one of them is starting with one or two fingers, and as I progress, you'll see I slowly start to add more fingers back to the stick. This is kind of how I started getting my brain to get away from the wrist movement I was using. There is some wrist movement in this, but it's in a different plane. That's kind of how I think about it. And the other thing I like to do that you'll see a lot is because my right hand already has some technique in this, I use my right hand as kind of an example or as a teacher. So I will do a few notes with the right hand, and then I'll try to copy it with the left. Or another useful thing you'll see me do is I'll play both hands together, and this gives me a really good feel for how even my hands feel. Like I said, one of my goals was to get my hands to feel more even, which once I developed that, it did really help me with things like fast fills and blast beats and things like that. So here's an example of playing both hands together. Looks like here I might have three fingers on the stick. So whatever I'm doing with one hand, I'm doing the same thing with the other, because I really want to feel that they're the same. So, I did mess around. Like I said, I started with one or two fingers on the stick, But even during the same practice session, I might try adding two or three and just kind of see where it is, but always being aware of the fact that when I do have more fingers on the stick than I'm ready for, I'll start to go back to that old technique. So just something to play around with, be aware of that the whole time. I know everyone is kind of coming from a different place with this, but for me, that was kind of the most important thing, is to just make sure that I'm practicing the motion that I want to be practicing and not continuing to reinforce my old motion, since I was really trying to completely change my technique on my left hand. Okay, so here's another angle of my left hand in this first practice session. This is more or less the technique I was starting with. As you can see, it's kind of wristy, sort of wobbly. I don't really know how to describe it. And then here's kind of where I was starting with the right hand. It's not perfect, but it's a lot more stable, a lot closer to proper finger technique. All right, so this is about a week in. As you can see, not much has changed. Still practicing the same thing. My left hand has maybe gotten a little more confident, a little more stable. Starting to maybe add a few more fingers on the stick. Looks like I got 3 fingers on here. Starting to feel comfortable with maintaining that motion that I want. My practice routine, I would practice probably not every day, but I would say 5-6 days a week is probably good. I don't think every day is necessary. You don't want to burn yourself out either, but the more you can practice, the better, obviously. And my whole goal was 15 minutes is my minimum. So I'd sit down at the pad, I'd set my timer, and if I got to 15 minutes and I was just over it, then that's it, I was done. But a lot of times I found I would get warmed up, things would feel good, and I would just want to keep going. So I think starting the timer, make sure you get that amount of time, and then if you want to do extra, then that's a bonus. Here's another example of unison practice. Like I said, this is a really great way to see if your hands are even, because when you're doing it at the same exact time, you can really tell if both hands are doing the same motion. You can look at them and see if they look the same. So it's a really great tool. Now keep in mind, this is unison, so I'm not flamming, or I'm trying not to flam. So both sticks are hitting the pad at exactly the same time. At least that's what you're going for. Okay, so this is roughly 3 weeks into my practice now. You can see I'm starting to mess around a little bit with that left hand, with that little reboundy sort of thing. You can see I don't really have good control over it. The stick is not following my fingers well. I completely lose it sometimes just because I don't have the control yet. But that's normal. A lot of this is going to feel kind of bad for a while. That was my experience, like several weeks at least, of just feeling like, why am I doing this? Like, how is this possibly going to work? But you just got to trust it, just got to stick with it. It'll eventually get somewhere. So now we're at close to the end of June, so this is almost a month of practice. Still working on getting comfortable with that straight up and down, 1 finger, 2 fingers on the stick sort of thing. As you can see, I had knee surgery around this time, so it was kind of a good time to be practicing on the pad. Not really much to see here, just kind of making the point that a lot of this is just putting the time in, doing it every day for weeks, months, whatever it takes. It's not really glamorous. There's not really any secret to it. I'm not the world's best drummer. I just put enough time in to be good at this one thing. So just stick with it and you'll make progress. So you can see now I'm starting to develop a little bit more control, a little bit more power over that stroke. It's starting to look like I'm actually hitting the drum, and that motion is quite a bit different than what I started with a month ago. It's more French grip technique and less German grip, and that's exactly what I was going for. So this is some good progress I'm starting to make at this point. A little later in the practice session, starting to get warmed up, got all the fingers on the stick, getting some good power out of this, getting some nice strong strokes, nice control. It's starting to look like something. Now, like I said, my practice is very unstructured, so I'll kind of go back and forth in one session between different things where generally in the beginning of the session, I'll start slow and easy, just kind of warm things up. And, maybe I'll work on getting a little faster later. Maybe I'll mess with, more fingers on the stick, less fingers on the stick. Just kind of trying different stuff out. Again, always being cognizant of the fact that I'm using the technique I want to be using. I'm not reverting to that old technique or whatever the focus may be for you as far as your personal technique. But just, trying different stuff out and getting the reps in is what it's about. So feeling good, little speed test here. Still not great control, but better than the last time you saw me do that. Okay, so this is about a week later, and this is sort of when things started to change for me as far as my practice approach. So once I got through that initial phase of getting used to swinging the stick in a different direction than I had been, which I accomplished through starting with one finger, then two fingers, etc. Basically, what I had was a French grip technique, and I realized that my right hand had developed a pretty good finger technique without any pad practice, just because I had already been using more of a French grip to begin with. And my opinion is that the foundation of a good finger technique is really a strong French grip technique. So most of my practice after this point is just more or less French grip technique. And a lot of that practice you'll see is going to be at lower tempos than you would really use fingers for. Now, keep in mind, I rarely ever used a metronome during this whole process. Maybe once in a while if I was feeling bored or if I wanted to check my speed or something, but I would say 99% of the time I didn't use a metronome. I just feel like when you're learning a new technique, it's kind of distracting, and it becomes more about keeping time with the metronome rather than focusing on the movement. Anyway, my strategy at this point was basically I just wanted to get comfortable with this French grip technique. So what I started doing was I would hit the pad using the French grip movement, and I would keep it at whatever tempo I was comfortable with. Like I said, no metronome, but I could tell if I was pushing it too fast because the technique would break down. I would either start using a different movement or I would just lose control of the stick. So I just kept it in that comfortable range, maybe pushed it a little bit and then went back. And because this is kind of how I developed it with my right hand on the kit, is just basically playing music that I was comfortable with and always pushing myself a little bit to develop the speed. So similar strategy here, just keeping it in a range where I can use the proper technique and just kind of develop muscle memory over time. So jumping ahead a couple weeks here, we're at close to 2 months of practice. As you can see, my left hand, I'm starting to get a little bit faster with it now. You can see I still don't have really great control over it. This is probably at the upper range of my comfortable speed at this point. Like I said, my practice session, I probably started a whole lot slower than this, worked up to this, and then probably went back to playing more moderate, just French grip. This is more unison practice. This is, again, a fairly slow tempo. This is French grip, mainly wrist. At this point, I started mixing in some single stroke rolls, maybe some other rhythmic stuff as I started to get more comfortable. Just kind of kept things interesting, and just another way to practice and just kind of try and make things even, make it feel a little more like playing the drums. So here's some examples of some of the rhythmic stuff that I like to do. Just kind of alternating singles between both hands. Most of the time also I would do it so that there was more on the left hand than the right. So like, I might play 4 notes on the right hand and then 12 notes on the left hand. So kind of like 4 beats of 16th notes. But that way I was getting more practice on the left since that's the hand that needed it. I really like to play it this way with flams. Just felt like it kept me locked in more. You can play it with or without flams. And again, none of this has to be structured. This is just something I came up with that I liked and just gave me something to do. None of this is with a metronome. Just kind of having fun and just, it can be whatever you want to make it. Same thing with a little bit faster tempo now. Good to kind of mix things up with the speed. Push yourself a little bit, but again, you don't want to push so far that your technique starts breaking down, because then you're just developing muscle memory playing it badly. So, different tempos, try it slow, try it fast. Really, you want to be comfortable across every tempo range. So, warm up slow, speed yourself up. If you push too far, kind of find that limit and then back off and go back to like a comfortable tempo and just try and get as many reps in as you can. So starting to see a little actual speed here. And if you look at that left hand, you can see that the stick is starting to follow the fingers pretty well. They're working together using that rebound. And that's really, the speed is really a side effect of control. And as you develop that control, you'll just start to get faster. So don't worry about getting fast. If you just get better and better at whatever tempo you're comfortable at, you'll develop that control and it'll just start to create speed on its own. So this is one of the last practice sessions I did. And as you can see, things are starting to click. That left hand is honestly maybe faster than the right at this point. Not as good control, but the speed is definitely there. I've definitely figured out how to do that finger technique that I was looking for. So this is right around 2 months of practice, and kind of my goal with this video was just to show you guys where I started from, where I got to, what my progress looked like, and just some of my tips, some of the ideas that I kind of developed along the way. So a few takeaways I want you to get from this. Number one, this is not rocket science. I am not the best drummer in the world. You don't need a fancy training program. It's just hit the pad a lot and get better. Most important thing is just being consistent, getting those 15 minutes a day, whatever it is. Your body does a lot of the learning process when you're asleep, so it's about practicing something enough that your body wants to remember it, and then once you are done and you're resting and you're sleeping, your body creates those connections and you come back better the next day. Here's another fun rhythmic thing I was doing, just singles, doubles, paradiddles, just something to mix things up. And this would actually end up being my last practice session. I got to the point where I felt like I'd accomplished my goal, where my left hand was pretty much equal to my right, and at that point I decided I would just go back to playing the drums because that's more fun. So I did do a little bit of metronome stuff this session, just kind of feeling things out, playing some single stroke rolls and seeing how tight my rhythm could be and getting a check on my speed, that kind of thing. But again, the metronome wasn't really part of my practice for these 2 months. This was more just, seeing where I was at. So in conclusion, what I found personally to be the most important thing to developing this technique is just developing your French grip. And for me, it was helpful early on to work with those individual fingers to learn how to get that motion without turning my wrist in a way that I didn't want to do. But the key point is that I didn't really spend much time practicing just with my fingers beyond that initial stage. And that was more to just kind of get the feel of moving in that axis and kind of rolling the stick between my thumb and my fingers, which really just brought me to French grip. So I think those two things together, working a little bit with the fingers and then also really just focusing on getting your French grip to be really solid, those are the two keys that are going to get you where you want to be. So hopefully this was insightful, kind of seeing my process. Hopefully some of my thoughts were helpful to you and just kind of seeing what went into this whole thing and giving you like a realistic expectation for your own progress.